Okay, so exploded isometrics. This is a kind of a test house I was using in another class, but it's enough to give us what we want. So this is a kind of a model. It's a very simple model. It's got some doors. It's got two types of walls. It's got a stairs. Not so much stuff going on. A few different things going on in a kitchen demonstration. So if I was to go into the 3D view here and turn on the section box.
Are you recording this? Or?
Yeah, I'm recording this. Yeah. Now you're recorded as well. So you can see it's a very simple layout, but it's enough to do what we want to do. So let's switch that off again. So if you want to make this drawing here, the exploded isometric drawing, you have the standard 3D view, which you can go into just by pressing this shortcut at the top here, default 3D view, which will give you this. You can then press the corner of the view cube here to give it a 60-degree orientation, 60-degree, 30-degree orientation, and you can lock it in place. So down here we have a tiny little button that locks the 3D view in place. And the reason I'm doing that is, once you lock it in place, you can actually put text on it, and you can actually apply different things to it. If you don't lock it in place, you can't put any text on it because the text will just be flying around as you're rotating around. But the first thing I'm going to do is copy the view. So I'm going to come down here to 3D views, and I'm going to right click and just going to say duplicate the view. So now it makes a view called 3D copy 1. So they're both exactly the same view at the moment, from the same viewpoint. So I'm going to right click on this again and rename it, and I'm just going to call this one Exploded Isometric. Okay. Now, what Revit does as a default is it shows you the entire building element. So if it's showing you a wall, it's showing you all the layers in the wall, but it's all assembled into one piece. But that's only one way of looking at it. And over here, if you don't click on anything, there's a setting in the properties menu called Parts Visibility, and it's set to Show Original. And Parts Visibility is it's telling us, or Revit is telling us what it's displaying, and it's only displaying the original view without any modifications to it. But we can actually split all these elements into their individual layers as well if we want to really get into it. So I could, for example, select this wall here and come up to this button here called Create Parts. If I just leave that on there, you can see that you actually get control over the different layers within the wall then once you do that. And you can play with them however you want. But it doesn't modify the actual model itself. It only modifies the view in this specific copied 3D view. So this doesn't transfer to any of the other views. So you get a chance to actually play with all the elements in there to display them in a different kind of a way. So I say create parts here. The wall has now, you can see that it doesn't join up anymore. It's been separated out into different parts. And over here in the 3D view properties, the parts visibility has been changed to show parts. If I change it back to show original, you can see it joins up again. So it's got both the wall model and the parts model, coexisting in the same position at the moment. Once I turned it into parts, I can select the individual elements like this, and I can use this tiny little button here, which is called Displace Elements. And I can just drag out whatever direction I want the individual layers within the wall. Whoops, didn't do that right. That's already set up. So you can quickly kind of set up a constructional view of your entire project. Like this, and yeah, okay, we can move those too if we want. Let's just displace those ones out here. And once you've done that, you can select it and you can add a path line. And all this does is it gives you a little dotted line that tells you where this part has come from. So then you end up with something like that. Yeah.
Where do you use this?
This is to make a drawing like this.
Where do you use it out on the side?
To explain the construction of the house in one drawing. If you want to, like, you can look at that as a carpenter and say, oh, that's a timber frame house, but with brick at the bottom. So it's just to make it easy for people to understand. And you can do it in two ways. You can use it as a design tool, or you can use it on the construction site, because if you ever go to a construction site and you're trying to explain a complicated detail, if you have a 3D view like this that the guys can just look at, it's so much easier for them to understand than if you have like a lot of complicated drawings. You need the complicated drawings as well, but this type of view is just, you just get it like that, you know. So that's kind of what it's used for. So we can do the same thing with the roof here. We can explode it, take it up, and put a path in place like this. And basically, you can just continue to do this with all the pieces within the drawing until you have you've got a very descriptive view of how the building goes together. If you add the structure to that, like we were talking about yesterday, then you get all these elements in there as well. And you can see how, you know, it's quite simple, but it's a very kind of powerful way of looking at it. So let's say we turn it this way, and we can change the quality to realistic, for example. And if I now go in here and lock the view like I was talking about earlier by pressing this button, save orientation and lock view, I can now use the tagging tool under annotate to, if it's loaded the right tag, to go in and do a material tag. And it hasn't got one loaded. Let's have a look. Yeah, material tag. So you can see it's actually telling us this is rock wool. You know, put it there. This one is common brick, or whatever you've named your materials. So you don't actually have to go in and type all that stuff in yourself. The information is already in the within there. The last thing, because this is just it. That's it. There's no more complicated than that. But the last thing you can do is you can also divide these parts into smaller parts. So let's say you wanted to describe this this insulation layer here. If you wanted to divide it into smaller parts, you can also do that. But you need to do it before you take it out like this. So I'm going to reset it back to where it is, and then you get this option up here to divide parts. And then I can actually go around and sketch divisions. Oh, let me just check if I got this right now. Wait a second. Let's do this again. Divide parts. What you can generally use for this is intersecting references. So this is where your grids come in. If your grids at 600 millimeters, you can actually use your grids to divide the insulation into the correct dimension, because they're always made to a 600 mil dimension. So an insulation bath, for example, would be 1200 wide. So you can use every second grid to divide it into elements. Now let's just see, before I get too confusing, let's just see if we have a grid line in the right position here. I don't have any grid lines at all. Wait a second. Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. Just for the sake of doing this, I'm going to put a grid line in here. Go to architecture, grid. So these grid lines you've already set up can be used to divide the elements. So let's go back in here, divide parts, intersecting references, and then we can choose grids. Any grids that are in there. Seems like we've got a lot. I don't remember where I did this from, but let's just see if we can change them all at once. And let's just so you can see where the grid passed through the insulation. They're actually dividing it. So if you were to set it up, you can actually decide which grid line you want to split the insulation in place. We can also use the levels. Let's say we want to split it at first floor plan, and that will also cut it at the correct orientation for us. Press OK and finish. So now the insulation has been split up into individual bats as well. Does that make sense? And this can also then be exploded out and taken out as individual pieces if you want to, really show the individual pieces of it. Okay. Later on, you can use that to make a cutting list that'll actually give you a schedule of all those pieces that you can use to calculate the very, very specific and very accurate requirements for the materials in the project. But for this project, this is how you do something like this. And that are the only deliverables that we want from the Revit course. So the level of quality for the model is the same as the one you did for the last project. And then if you give this a chance as well, because this is actually a nice design tool as well, because you actually end up changing the project often when you start playing with things like this, because you start to see things that you haven't seen otherwise. All right. Okay, I'll pause that one for a second.